As we tackle extreme poverty in the world, we're facing a number of other big challenges now. One is the onset of climate change and dealing with both mitigation and adaptation. And the other is dealing with the fact that now our development models, particularly in cities, are beginning to move beyond planetary boundaries. So we've really got to address those things as we address extreme poverty. The only way I believe we can do this is to focus on cities, and the reason for that is that cities are the places where integrated systems planning and resource efficiency can really be exercised through planning models, from land use models, from using materials more efficiently, closing resource loops and so on. It's very difficult to do that at a national scale, but we can do it at a city scale. And so in my trust we're developing models to enable this to be done. So I'm very convinced that the way we demonstrate poverty reduction combined with living within planetary boundaries and dealing with climate change, I believe if we focus on cities we're much more likely to achieve those outcomes more quickly.
Cities are important and are going to be even more important as the world becomes more and more urban. We're going to expect, the majority of the population living in urban spaces. So therefore, cities are going to play a major role if we want to build a sustainable development world.
First of all, there is a demographic trend that population increase is going to happen predominantly in cities, and cities in developing countries. We're talking about 90% of population increase is going to happen mainly in Africa and in South and Southeast Asia. So that really deserves special attention. At the same time, cities are bringing in most of the economic growth for countries. No country has ever been able to raise to middle income status without urbanizing, so there's a very clear role for cities in that regard. But environmentally, cities are taking up more and more space, agricultural land, so the sprawl issue is a negative trend that we are seeing recently. And socially, of course, we have a proliferation of slums, we have youth unemployment, particularly acute in cities. So again, these are issues which local governments will have to address. And I'm saying local governments, but the situation has become more complex with extending cities, whereby we need to look at multi-level governance frameworks to address these issues.
Well, cities are different from most other human settlements in the history of mankind, in that sort of people live close together and work together and produce goods. And the modern city has arisen with the industrial age, and it has given rise to an unprecedented upswing in the wealth and well-being of people. On the other side, of course, we have remaining poverty that we need to address. But cities have these special opportunities, and that's why they really need to be treated in a very special way.
Well, we know the world is urbanizing. We know that more than half of the world's population live in urban areas. We know that most new investment is concentrating in urban areas. So inevitably we're seeing an increasing urbanization in the world, both in where people live and where people work.
Cities are fulfilling now a very important role in transforming development. For a long time, there was a focus on rural development, which of course is crucially important. But what we see now is that cities themselves are drivers of economic growth, drivers for poverty alleviation, and leaders in sustainable development.
If we can move to cities that are more connected, that are more integrated and more compact, and do this in an inclusive way, we will have optimized on what cities can offer and basically take advantage of urbanization the positive forces of urbanization for overall human well-being. I think it's a feasible proposition, but it needs specific attention to the needs of cities, and I think that's very important for having the attention to the needs of cities very high on the political agenda.
In theory, basically cities concentrate manufacturing and service sector activity, and typically manufacturing and service sector growth in many parts of the world over the last 50 years or so has been much more rapid than that in agriculture. So, if you have a sustainable agriculture, you might have 2.5 or 3% year-on-year growth over a long period of time. But some advanced manufacturing economies, and more specifically China in the last 20 years, has done manufacturing growth that's closer to 2 digits. And the service sector has grown even faster. So essentially what happens with this is you can actually double the size of an economy in maybe 7 to 10 years. That means in 2 generations you can actually quadruple the size of the economy. So what that means is that not only lifts the floor because people's incomes rise, and of course there are some questions about disparities because cities do tend to sort of encourage increasing inequity and inequality. But the more interesting thing, of course, is that governments, whether it be city governments or national governments, because of their taxation base extending, actually have a lot more resources available to them, which means that the possibility of intergovernmental transfers from national governments to city governments, and also the question of sort of increasing and deepening the tax base of cities themselves, mean that a lot more public resources are available. Plus, of course, as the economy goes, private investment increases, and private investment, if it's managed well and is sort of handled equitably, can not only create jobs, but it can also create opportunities for economic development. So it's a question of where you invest, how you invest, how you manage consumption and people's expectations of what they would like to do. And in some senses, cities are great places if they become environments for learning. And in that sense, innovation can actually pick up quite quickly. But on the other hand, if you do get stuck in a highly stratified situation, which is exclusionary, that may make things much more difficult. As we've seen in, let's say, apartheid cities or near apartheid cities in various parts of the world, exclusion is somewhat difficult to break in an urban environment in which it becomes structural. So, that's something that we have to think about.
From now to 2050, 2.8 billion people will be going to be added in cities. That means we'll be making new cities, we'll be developing rural settlements into urban settlements. If we do not allow cities from the very initial stage to lock into the energy intensive infrastructure, energy intensive pathways, then I think we have a huge opportunity to relieve the pressure at the end, what comes out from the urban metabolism or the urban dynamics.
You can look at cities and their phenomenal health disadvantage, and you can look at cities and their phenomenal health advantage. And the difference between the two is the quality of government, the quality of governance, and the quality of their relationships with those groups most at risk. So you can find cities where life expectancies of birth are 85 to 90 years, where all the basic determinants of health are good. You can equally go to cities with no piped water supplies, no sewers, no drains, garbage collection services maybe for 10% of the population, half the population in informal settlements, lacking health care, lacking all the determinants of health, with life expectancies at birth of 40 to 45 years. So really we have in our power, through good governance, good government at local level, to transform a city that is comparable to Victorian England under Dickens, the writing of Dickens, to one of the most healthy places on the planet.
Well, looking back for the past 100, 200 years, it's very obvious that in the developed world, the cities have been the focus for developing the economy, for moving to higher level, higher value goods production, for the service sector, of course. And so cities are rightly referred to as the engines of economic strength. I'm convinced that the same will be happening and has happened already in many developing countries. If I look at the fast-growing Asian cities in the Asian developing countries, the same is happening here in a different way, but basically it's that cities are enabling people, enterprises to work more productively and to create wealth better, and the same is likely to happen in countries which are still poor yet and which are struggling to get out of poverty.
The cities will be increasingly growing in the future, and the challenges are huge. This is very complex because we have to work on housing, on security, on creating jobs, on transportation, etc. The cities have to change radically, and for me the key challenges for a city is to provide access to all the people, all the citizens, to basic services such as water, energy, clean air to breathe, land waste management, sanitation, etc. So if all citizens have as a minimum those basic services, that will be an interesting step forward.
Well, every generation thinks that they have new issues to face, but in cities, as they have been around for so many thousands of years, some issues come in again and again, and they have to solve every time, and every new generation has to solve these issues. But certainly at this moment, probably we have some very specific issues that are a little bit different than before, and I would mention that these two. First, the huge urbanization process that is going on globally, and that gives us a very strong challenge on how to bring together the 3 or 4 strands of sustainability. We have to make sure that economic, social, environmental, and even cultural sustainability is there. And the second, related to the environment, is probably climate change. This is, I would say, even if there is a lot of effort by the scientists, is an unpredictable thing. And nobody knows exactly what is going to happen. And so I think that cities have to take a very strong stand at this to avoid fragility. I think cities is one of the less fragile institutions in history, but nevertheless I think they have to take a stronger stand on that. And I like the idea of cities having an agenda for resilience, and even some people has created the word anti-fragility. So I think we have to take it very seriously and make sure that our cities are anti-fragile.
Urban crime have a diverse, it's diverse depending on the society that you are living. If you go to the north, the sort of crime that is being perpetrated is different from when it comes to the global south. In our part of the world, I would dwell on 2 crimes. One, the growing drugs in terms of hard drugs, the use of hard drugs. For example, Ghana has on recent time become a transit point for hard drugs. And that is not becoming a transit point alone, but the local consumption is also increasing. And that has a cascading effect on other crimes, armed robbery and juvenile delinquencies. It needs a concerted effort within the sub-region to resolve such a problem. We also see, because of unemployment, the youth also going into other crime, like armed robbery, like crimes that were not hitherto known in the society. Another crime that is also surfacing is prostitution, and this time in the global south, not only female prostitution, but male prostitution. Things that were hitherto not known in the society. And because of the element of globalization and the increased technology, it's opening the north to the south, and crime that was not known is now resurfacing within the sub-region. And these needs to be tackled in a very holistic manner. Unemployment, trying to solve the unemployment problem, trying to curb the incidence of informality so that we can solve it in a very holistic manner.
Well, I think there are a number of different challenges that cities are facing at this point. The first important thing is that the city have those kind of traditional challenges, providing access to the urban dwellers, the basic services, and also now in last several years, now many new challenges has aired up, especially from the resource consumption side or the climate change mitigation and adaptation. All those new challenges actually adding on to all those existing challenges for cities, and in a sense some kind of stress to the urban decision makers on how to cope up with the very, very traditional drivers as well as all the new drivers. And urbanization has become very, very dominant force in last couple of decades. And at one hand, we have to provide basic services. At the same time, more and more people coming in cities, new urban areas are developing. So the scale of the problem and the nature of the problem both have a tremendously changed in last several years. So we have a drivers more on socio-economic side. We have bit more cultural side, and people are getting more income and more lifestyle change, and also a lot of technological elements coming in. So these drivers are quite multiple. I would say demographic side, the economic side, social side, even the land use change side. I think these are multiple drivers putting a stress into what we do and how we do in the urban system.
The challenge of cities is to actually use this concentration of economic activity, of culture, of knowledge, of institutions to be able to address some fundamental transformations. I guess the most important one is to end poverty, and specifically ending urban poverty is probably one of the most important things that will help us end rural poverty at the same time because of the induced linkages between rural and urban areas. The second thing is that in many cultures, when people move to cities, at least over a couple of generations, a lot of the social stratification and some of the other forms of stratification tend to blur. Of course, we have a long way to go on, let's say, gender inclusion, but both in terms of women participating in the workforce, having more equal opportunities, and actually driving the agenda of what's important is something that will happen, and cities provide a tremendous opportunity for that to work itself out. The other thing, of course, is because we now have, or we will now have a culture in which there are a large number of cities of various shapes and sizes, setting up a governance frame that allows them and accommodates them within the current framework of nation states and regions is going to be an interesting challenge, because now you have cities, especially mega urban regions, that are much larger than traditional countries, and they trade with each other. They actually share a lot of things, especially information, and I suspect that over the next 20 or 30 years we'll see a sort of a new level of governance, irrespective of whether constitutions of the world actually provide for it, which emerge out of cities and urban areas. And developing that frame is going to be very interesting and challenging. And of course, the real challenge with cities is that while they bring together resources and they also concentrate economic activity and potential, they consume a lot of resources. And over the last let's say 50 to 60 years or so, cities, especially in the high-income countries, have consumed a disproportionate amount and value of natural resources in the world. So there is a tremendous opportunity to use them and use the innovation that we are seeing across the world in many places to try and reduce the throughput of resources, to try and make economic development more efficient, more equitable.